Lucio, I started the recording.
Awesome. Thank you, Carrie. Bree, how many people are we waiting on?
We are waiting on, I believe, 3. Let me double check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let me send out a team reminder real fast.
Some.
Okay, so we're waiting on, I believe, 3 people. One of which is out of the office currently, so you should be good to go ahead.
Okay, I'll get started then. Okay. Awesome. Okay, welcome you guys to the second week of the advanced training. Today we're going to be talking about self-employment. Mostly the idea today is to talk about tax returns. We're going to get a little bit deeper to cover some basics and some examples together. So if at any time you guys have a question, just feel free to raise your hand. You can use also the chat, and I'll have Sophie keep an eye on it if we need to stop and address any questions. Okay. Awesome. So the first thing that I want to start on is there are many differences. I'm not going to cover definitions on what self-employment actually is. That is something that we should all know by now, and it's something that is in the cheat sheet. But the main thing that I want to start with, by looking at, that some self-employment give some sort of pay stubs when it comes to how can I put it? They usually receive some sort of pay stubs to show how much money they are getting. But in comparison to normal employees, what is something that would stand out to you guys that someone is actually self-employed and not a normal employee? By looking it up.
They are not paying federal taxes.
Excellent, Fede. Great catch. And that is one of the main things. And am I sharing my screen correctly? Are you guys able to see my screen?
Yeah, looks good.
Awesome. So one of the main things that you'll see is that, and this is also in the cheat sheet, so let me show you that as well. So if we go to the cheat sheet, I think it's on page 5, we have some examples that when it comes to self-employment, you'll see that there are no deductions nor taxes deducted from their pay. So usually their gross and also the net amounts will match, will be the same ones. So if you are reviewing a normal employment that was recorded as employment on a file and you come across one of these little red flags, you should issue a correction for the applicant to change it to self-employment, and then you'll follow the normal steps. Okay, but just like Fede was saying, if you see that there are no deductions nor taxes, that should be a red flag that you're actually dealing with self-employment. So the applicant will need to change it so that the self-employment declaration is created and you will get all the information that you need. Am I making sense so far? Okay. Some extra keywords that could also let you know in normal pay stubs that you're actually dealing with self-employment could be this little phrase right here, 1099 compensation. This also applies to EVs if you get a title that is 1099 employee or constructor or subcontractor, that would mean that you're dealing with self-employment. Okay, so you would have the applicant switch everything to self-employment, and as usual, the main preference, the first preference will always be getting the tax return from the applicant. Any questions so far?
No.
Awesome. So if you haven't checked the cheat sheet, everything is covered now, and we actually added a few extra things in the tax return review yesterday that will help you guys go through the entire tax return and be able to spot those things that may need to be addressed and how to run calculations as well. So, as I was saying before, always the first preference will always be the tax return. Then, if it is not available, we'll talk about probably, if we have time today, or if we don't, probably next week, we'll talk about what we do if the tax return is not available, or if it happened that the applicant started being self-employed in the current calendar year. We'll talk about those scenarios later on. But as usual, if you're dealing with self-employment, the first thing that you will want to get is that tax return to go through. And everything is explained here in the cheat sheet, so we'll cover the steps to go through them and prepare our notes together. Okay, am I making sense so far?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Awesome. So let's take a look at an example. What I did actually, I downloaded the cheat sheet from Canva so I can check everything that I'm doing, and I can write down in here just to make it a little bit simple, something that I like doing. But the first thing that we'll do when it comes to the tax return is that the first thing that we'll do is start with the self-employment declaration. There are some pieces of information that we need to get from here that eventually will become useful to us. So let's start with the notes. We'll write down self-employment. I can write down in parentheses the type of self-employment and the start date, since that would help me know if I need to annualize the amounts from the tax return. In this case, since they started being self-employed prior to the year of the tax return, that if we go a little bit down, we see that it is from 2023. So we wouldn't have to worry about annualizing anything. And I'll also write down the anticipated amount just in case they are anticipating to make more than what is actually verified in the tax return. Am I making sense so far?
Yes, Lucio.
Awesome. So let's get into the cheat sheet and go through everything together. So as usual, we start with the 1040 form. We have some steps to take into consideration that we'll go through together. So the first thing that the cheat sheet tells me to do is ensure that the name matches the application and then review the marital status. Those are the first two things that we're meant to do. So we see that the name of the applicant is Namun Ganbat, and I'll check also in the tax return. I see by paying attention to the marital status is that this is a couple that is married and filing jointly. And I see that I have my applicant here, Namun Ganbat. Now, the fact that they are married would make us go back to the application and see if they recorded that they are married. If in the application for residency, it shows that they never been married, then we will need to address this with the applicant and find out what's going on. But if you go to the application and they are married and you have the other, their spouse in the file, then that's completely fine. Am I making sense so far? Any questions?
Yes. No.
Okay, if there are any questions, feel free to jump in, raise your hand, please. So this is not a monologue.
Ooh.
I have a question.
Yes, Lola.
You wrote down the anticipated amount just in case they anticipated more. How much more is something to be addressed?
Usually it's more than $1,000.
All right. Thank you.
Problem. So we can check these two and get them out of the way. The next thing that we want to do is confirm that all dependents are listed on the application. If not, ask if they will join the household in the next 12 months. So I will scroll down to the dependent section. I see that there are 2 children. So I would go back to the application for residency and see if they were listed on the application. If they were not, then we will ask to know if they are actually going to join the household. Am I making sense so far? Did someone unmute for a second?
I was on mute.
Okay, so once we clear this out, we're going to check lines 1 through 7 for additional income sources. If they are not declared in the application, we need to have them addressed. So let's go into the tax return. And as you guys are seeing, the only thing that I'm doing so far is I'm going step by step in the cheat sheet. I'm not doing anything that is not here. So if you follow this step by step, you will be completely fine. And this is why Sophie and I drill into your brains the fact that you should use the cheat sheets. So let's grab from line 1 through 7 so we can see if there are any additional sources of income. So I'll grab 1 through 7. And I'll see that there are some numbers in here. There's one here. And if I check into the description, I see that there are wages present in the tax return. Yes, Caro.
Sorry, Lou, I just wanted to ask you if they are, if their marital status or if there is a person on the tax return and it's not on the application, would a clarification be acceptable, or we would have to have them clarify and also correct it on the application, right?
So the thing is, if they are actually married, we will need to have them added to the application and verify their income. Right, Carrie?
Correct. Yep. Yeah, it just depends on, we'll start with the clarification. It depends on what that clarification says. If they say, oh yeah, yep, I am married, then as Lucio said, they need to be included. Or maybe they say, whoops, I'm actually separated. Then we'll have them, we'll open up the application so they can revise their marital status.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Thank you.
No problem. Thank you, Carrie. So the thing, one thing that came up yesterday during the training with the other team was what happens if they're actually now divorced. Since remember that when it comes to tax return, we're taking a look at the last year. So there is a chance that that John and Namun actually got divorced in the beginning of 2024. That is actually the case, but it would raise a red flag if you see that in the application for residency, it says that they never been married. But as usual, like Carrie said, we are going to ask for a clarification, and based on the answer, then we'll we'll see what to do. I think
sorry.
Camilo, you raised your
Sorry.
hand for a second.
Yeah, you just had word, so it's okay.
Okay, awesome. Mati and then Fede.
Okay. It is the same if the applicant is saying that they are separate now, and we can see that they are married in the tax return.
Exactly. If they are separated, it needs to be addressed properly in the file. You will need to check the strange spouse declaration to see that it has been completed properly.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
No problem. Fede?
Yeah, Lucio. Now, I was just gonna ask if they file jointly, it's because they are legally married. There's no way they can file jointly without being actually married.
I believe you have to be married at least 6 months out of the year to file jointly. I believe they can be separated, but at least 6 months out of the year they were married.
Okay.
Awesome. So, tracking back to what we were doing, we found out that there are actually wages present in the tax return. Just by looking at the 1040 form, since we have two of our applicants filing jointly, just by looking at this, I can't be sure if these wages are actually from John or from Namun, because all their income will be together in the 1040 form and the Schedule 1. You will have those totals together. When it comes to Schedule Cs and self-employment, they will have their own Schedule Cs for their self-employments. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Mati, did you had another question? You have your hand raised.
Oh, sorry about that. No, I don't have any question right now. I have one, but I'm waiting for you to get there.
Okay, awesome. So what I'm going to do now that I actually found that there are actually wages present, I'm going to write it down. Since you guys will have the entire application, the entire file, if you see that there is actually employment listed, like for example, if the applicant is doing Uber and then on the side they have their normal job, then we don't have to address it. But if you see that these people are only self-employed, but then you see that there are wages, we will have them address it. Am I making sense so far?
Yes.
So if they are still currently employed, they will need to add it to the application, provided with pay stubs and the normal way of verifying income for normal wages. If they stop, then if they don't work there anymore, we will have them add the termination date on the clarification. And once we have that, we'll add the clarification to the file. Mati?
Yes, just to confirm, Lucio, so if they have another job, we cannot just do our calculation with a tax return. We need pay stubs and everything for the job and also the tax return.
So when we're talking about this scenario, you will still use the tax return for self-employment. Okay? But the fact that you see wages here, it means that at least in 2023, one of them had a job. So we want to find out first if they still are employed. And if they are, they will need to add it into the application as normal employment. And for that, we will use the pay stubs to verify them. But when it comes to self-employment, we will follow the steps on the cheat sheet and pay attention to the Schedule C. We're talking about two separate things.
Okay, and this answered my question, the one that I had about if they are receiving Social Security, we need to have the Social Security letter.
anything that you find here in additional income sources or in the Schedule 1, if they are still receiving them, they will need to add it to the application, and they will need to address them as the normal way,
Yeah.
just like you
Yeah,
learned
perfect.
in the past.
Thanks. That was my question.
No problem. So I wrote down in my notes that there are wages present in the tax return. And then by checking the rest, I see there is one amount here that is actually a total from line 1A to 1H. And then if I scroll down a little bit more, I see that in line 7, I see capital gain or loss, and there is a negative amount. So let's go back to the cheat sheet and see what the cheat sheet tells us about those capital gains. Actually, let me use the Foxit one. So I've already checked lines 1 through 7, and here there is a sub-step under this one that says if capital gains are shown, check Schedule D to see what type of assets were disposed of, and then ask the applicant if they have any other type of assets. So let's see what I actually mean. We actually mean with all of this. Anytime that you see an amount listed on a tax return, usually in the description will let you know if there should be another form attached that is related to this amount. What do I mean with this? That here, since we have an amount, and I read here, capital gains or loss, here it says attach Schedule D if required, meaning that if there is an amount here, I should have a Schedule D. So let's zoom out and find it then. So I'll go down a little bit, see if I can find it. Schedule C's, Schedule D. So just by looking at it, I see that there is a Schedule D, and if I look for the form 8949 that talks about this other disposition of capital assets, I see that at the very least, they had something in when it comes to stocks. So what I want to know, since I spot this, is I want to ask the applicant if they have any other assets that have not been declared. Does that make sense? Was that confusing?
And do we need to ask specifically for this thing that we can see right here, or just ask the question if they have another asset?
We want to know if they have any other assets. Or do you want to jump in, Carrie?
Yeah, no, good question, Matthias. We're asking specifically about that asset. Because so what that is it's like cryptocurrency or stocks, like Lucio mentioned. They sold a portion of them and lost money on that sale. Or I said portion, they could have sold a portion or they could have sold all of that account. We need to know, do they have any left? Did they only sell half of it and they still have another half of the account open that we need to include as an asset? So we're gonna ask if they have any of that asset remaining or if they sold it all.
Okay, thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Carrie. So going back to the 1040 form, what I'm going to do, since we found that out, is I'm going to write down in my notes that we need to ask the applicant about that. To see if they still actually have anything left, like Carrie was explaining.
Lucia, one more thing too. I want to that capital gain or loss is the applicant selling or disposing of an asset. So in this case, it's that cryptocurrency where maybe they only sold half of it. Do they have anything left in that account? But it also can be a home. We can sell a home for a loss or a gain, and that will get reported on our tax return, but it would clearly show on that form that it was a home. So if you're seeing a home listed there, we all know if the home was disposed of within the past 2 years, it needs to be documented. So in that case, we would ask for documentation of the sale of the home.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Carrie. Yeah, and technically, when it comes to real estate, if they were not lying on the application for residency, it should have popped up in the residency history as well. So we may need to have them fix things a little bit. So let's go back to the cheat sheet then. So the next thing that we see that we need to do, we have already written down what we're going to ask about capital gains. And then the next point says page 2 must be signed and dated. It may be signed electronically. If so, that space will be empty, but proof that was signed electronically should be attached. And usually if you have the proof of transmission, that is proof enough that it has as instead of the signature. Did that make sense, Carrie? Did I get it correct?
Yeah, it did. Yeah.
Okay, does that make
Sorry,
sense?
I
guys?
didn't understand that. No, sorry. No.
No worries. So the thing is now when it comes to tax return, one of the things that the applicant needs to submit is the proof of transmission, meaning that the proof that they actually submitted their taxes to the IRS. So with that, instead of having the page 2 signed, it should be enough if you have that proof of transmission, which you should. Okay. If it is already signed in page 2, that will also be your verification date. So in this case, if I come down here, I see that there is a space for the signatures. I see that they are pending. If I have the proof of transmission, it should be fine. But then if I have it signed and dated, these dates will be the verification date for your notes.
Lucio, that proof that you are talking about are the numbers that should be to the right in that little square?
So the proof of transmission that I'm talking about is a separate document. It is also
Oh.
in the cheat sheet. There is an example that we've added in page here in the last page actually. Carrie, would you mind explaining what the proof of transmission actually is, please?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So a tax return it's just a form that anybody can download and fill it out. If you asked me for my tax return, I could very easily give you a fake tax return today. I can download those forms and just fill in all of my information and make it up. What makes a tax return legitimate is this proof that we've actually transmitted that tax return to the IRS. Again, I can just make up a fake tax return. What proves that it's real is that I actually sent it to the IRS. And most of us, I mean, you could technically still mail in your tax return. I don't think anybody does that anymore. We submit them to the IRS electronically. And when we do that, we will get proof. There's a separate document that will show that your tax return was successfully transmitted to the IRS. And at the time that you transmit it to the IRS, we are also electronically signing that tax return. So the proof of transmission is proof it was sent and also proof that it was signed. Does that make sense, y'all?
Yes. My question is because someone told me once that if we can see, I think it's 6 or 8 numbers in that second page to the right, it is okay. We don't need to have the signature.
Good point. I know what you mean, Matthias. It's that pin.
Here?
I think that or the pin up right above that, Lou. That might be it, but no, that's not accurate, because again, I could just type
No,
those
no,
numbers in there.
the first one.
The first one, okay, okay. No,
No,
no.
sorry, the second one.
It-
That one. Yeah.
The
That
first
that
one you
that one.
circled the first time, Lou. But no, that's not proof of transmission or proof of signature. We need actual, there'll be an extra document in the file confirming transmission or electronic signature.
Okay, so if we have numbers over there, it doesn't matter. We need to have the signatures and date on the second page.
Yeah, just imagine that simply by coming here, I could edit it myself
Yeah.
and just fake that it's actually a PIN number. Caro?
Okay, so just to make sure, sorry everybody, but if there is no signature here, we have to have that proof of transmission. That's right. That's how it is.
No, No.
Okay.
no, good, no, good question. Okay, so when we are using a tax return, proof of transmission is required, regardless of the signature. So take the signature off the table for a second. We have to get proof that it was actually transmitted to the IRS, because otherwise it's fake. Like Lucio did, he just typed it on there, he made it up. Without proof of transmission, it's a fake document. And I'm speaking metaphorically. I mean, it could be a real document, but we have to assume it's fake without that proof of transmission. Once we get proof of transmission, that proof of transmission further proves that it was electronically signed. So we don't necessarily need the signature on this document anymore. Does that make sense, Carolina? Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Sorry.
thank you.
You're welcome. Sorry, Lou, I know I jumped in there.
No worries, no worries. So, maybe we could actually talk about getting this off the checklist.
Yeah, I
then
was going
later.
to say that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it needs to be fixed. But
Can you
we
write that
will
down,
do it.
Sophie?
No, yes, I have already done.
Okay,
that
awesome.
thing.
Okay. Awesome. So the next thing we're going to pretend that we have the proof of transmission for this one, since it is one of the requirements now with HOTMA regulations. You should have the proof of transmission, just like Carrie was explaining. So the next thing that we need to do is ensure that the occupation on page 2 matches Schedule C and self-employment declaration. So since we're paying attention to Namun side of the tax return to record their self-employment. Sophie, were you going to?
Yeah, just that on first page. Can you show the cheat sheet, Lou, again? There you have that you actually need proof of transmissions. It's not something that you won't see. There we go. So if then you scroll down and you go to page 9, I think, then it's where it explains what proof of transmission is. It's there. It's not that we haven't. This is something new for you and for us. So don't panic.
Okay, and I'm sorry, what's it gonna look like?
Something like this. It is there in the cheat sheet in the last page.
And the hard thing is with this proof of transmission, and like Sophie said, this is something new. HOTMA now requires this, and to be honest, I'm not sure why we never required it before, because like I said, tax returns could just be typed online. The hard thing about the proof of transmission is it's going to look different from one applicant to the next, just like everything, depending on what platform they used to submit their tax return. It will look different from one person to the next. So this person used, I don't know what system they used. I'm trying to see if I can see the name, because we've got different companies. So tax returns are hard for us to complete ourselves. Most of us will pay a company to help prepare our tax return. And there are lots of different companies that can help us. So transmission records from one company to the next are going to look a little different. So you may not see exactly this, but it'll be something similar.
Caro?
And does it say anywhere that it says proof of transmission? I mean, is there something that will let us know, okay, this is what we need? I mean, or is it
Yeah,
just like a,
zoom in a little bit on that, Lucia. I'll show you kind of like the keywords. Right there at the very top, e-filed 2023 tax return. And then down, it's telling them on that confirmation summary, under that section there, it says the IRS accepted your federal return 2023 federal submission. That's kind of the verbiage that we're looking for. So it'll say something about e-filing and e-signing and submission or transmission. Those are the keywords there.
Some good
And
question, Caro.
at the end, you can see that it says it's not a joke. Not just kidding. Sorry.
This is serious. This is not a fake document.
Okay, so it would be like a cover page. It would be the first page, and then the tax would come.
Maybe, yeah. Like mine, I'll have to find it. I have a copy of my proof of transmission, and mine is a screenshot from the website that I used. So yeah, it'll look. It may be an official cover page. It may be a screenshot from the website. But yeah, it'll be different from one file to the next.
Yeah. And something that I was talking with Carrie about when we're talking about the proof of transmission, it's that it looks really different to what we're used to when looking at a tax return. Like this looks extremely technical, and this is just simply from a website. So it can throw you off because it's not like these type of document, but you should look for these keywords that Carrie was talking about. Ale?
Yeah, not to be like super skeptical or anything, but how do we know if the proof of transmission is not fake? Like somebody could just
I was
type it
thinking
out
about the same
and
thing. Me
then
too.
turn it in.
We don't. That's a good question. And I love that you said that because they could provide us proof of transmission for the actual tax return that they got submitted, but provide us a separate, completely fake tax return. We don't know that the tax return that they're providing is the one that was transmitted. There's always loopholes, but we just have to trust that what they're providing us is accurate. But yeah, that's a good question.
Awesome. Okay, so tracking back to everything that we've been talking about, we were talking about the occupation. So if we go down to page 2, we should have the occupation for each. Since we were talking about Namun, which was the spouse in the tax return, we see here that she is recorded as a designer. And then if in the self-employment declaration, we see that it is actually Instacart. So this could mean that we actually have several Schedule Cs in this. So for now, we're going to leave it on pause, but we'll keep in mind that this is a different occupation from what we see in the self-employment declaration. Does that make sense? Okay, awesome. And then, so it tells us to compare that also to the Schedule C. So if we go down and look for the Schedule C, I see that the first one from Namun is beauty products. We're going to get into details about this later. So it doesn't really quite match since it was a designer, but then if we keep going down, we see that there is one Schedule C for John. This is what I was talking about. Each of them will have their own separate Schedule Cs for each separate self-employment. So if I keep going down, I'll see that there's another for Namun for a delivery. We'll get into this later. And then there is another one for Namun that is actually construction design, and that is where it matches. So the thing about comparing is that it's not that this is accurate, but we're dealing with several Schedule Cs. So we'll need to get clarifications about those extra ones. We'll get there in a minute. But for now, this will raise a flag for us to keep in mind that we're dealing with several Schedule Cs in the tax return. Now, we'll get into, is Namun actually doing those 3 separate things now in 2024? We'll need to find that out later with the applicant. But for now, let's get back in track and pay attention to the last step. Euse?
Yeah, should we have a proof of transmission for each occupation or just one for the whole thing?
It is just one for the whole thing, right, Carrie? Because it's for the tax return.
Correct. Yep.
And the last step for the Form 1040 is to check if the tax return has a bank account listed. If said account hasn't been disclosed, we will need to add it, have the applicant add it as an asset. So if I go here to the second page, we've taken a look at the signature, but there is a section right here that talks about refunds. So usually you may see that there are bank accounts listed, especially when someone pays for their taxes. If they overpay, the IRS will need to give them back the money that they overpaid. So usually there could be a bank account listed here in this section that if it doesn't match to what you have recorded on the application for residency, will need to be addressed. Does that make sense? See, no, kind of.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, awesome. Good to know. Okay, so that is basically what you need to keep in mind when it comes to the Form 1040. Everything that you, like I was mentioning a few minutes ago, everything that you've seen me do was simply going down the list and checking things out to see what's going on. So far, the only thing that popped up was that we saw wages, that we don't know if it is actually from Namun or John. And then we need to ask about the remaining crypto if there is. That may or may not need to be added to the application. Okay.
Sorry, Lou, can you show us again where it would be on the tax return regarding the bank account? It said refund?
Refund.
Okay.
So normally you would have a bunch of numbers here in the routing number and then the account number, and then it should be one of these two should be checked if it is a checking or a savings.
And about that crypto thing, they don't need to add it to the application if they don't have it, or in what case?
Exactly. If they still have remaining crypto, they will need to add it to the application. If you're verifying assets, they will need to provide the statement, and you will verify them as normal stocks or whatever it may be, or if it is real estate, like Carrie was saying, you may need to document it as being disposed of, but it will depend on if you need to verify or not.
Okay, because I believe if they don't have any crypto right now, they still have an account for that. Or no?
I'm not quite sure about that, Carrie.
No, if they say I sold all of the crypto, then that means the account was closed and we will not have them include it.
Okay.
Awesome.
So if they say that, sorry, if they say that, is that another clarification that we have to add to the file, or we just have them not add it and that's it?
You will add the clarification.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's go into the Schedule 1 then. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to find line 3 and or 5 in the Schedule 1. So in the Schedule 1, the ones that I said we should pay attention to is line 3 that mentions that a Schedule C should be attached, and I have an amount here. And then line 5, that is related to rental and real estate, royalties, partnerships, and whatnot. That is empty in this case. So I've already found the amount that we have. So the next step says amount listed in line 3 and or 5 should match line 10. So let's check that out. So I have line 3, that is 43,368, and line 10, which is a total, should match as well. So the question is, okay, what happens if these two don't match? Do I need to tell the applicant that they don't match? No. This is a key indicator for you guys to know that there is something here in the middle, that there are other types of income that are added here and that we should pay attention to. Some examples could be unemployment compensation. If there is an amount, you'll see that from line 3 to 10, there is some extra dollars in between, and you will need to get a clarification if they are still receiving that. Or it could be any of the other sources of income. Am I making sense so far?
Yes.
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 Okay, awesome. And then what it tells us here is that line 10 should also match line 8 on the 1040 form. So let's go back to the 1040 form. If I look for line 8, which is this one here, I see that it does match. Okay, and the last step that usually we would check either way is that we will check all lines for additional income sources if they have not been declared. So in this case, since we were looking at the Schedule 1 and we see that there's nothing else here in the middle, we can go into the Schedule C. Any questions about the Schedule 1?
No, about the Schedule 1. Can we receive another kind of a tax return, or this is the only how do you say, form?
I mean, it may look a little bit different from one to the other. You want to jump in, Carrie?
Yeah, sure. Every tax return starts with a 1040. So that first form that Lucio showed us, they're all going to start with that. There's only 2 variations for that. It's you'll see a 1040 or a 1040 EZ. It literally has the letters EZ after it, meaning it's like the easier version. Self-employed people cannot file the 1040 EZ. So if you ever see one of those, there's going to be no self-employment income on it. So Matthias, they'll all start with the 1040. It's the extra forms that will vary depending on the circumstances of the household.
Okay.
And let me, and I wanted, in Danielle's team yesterday, Sophie, will you do me a favor? Will you go to the chat from yesterday and steal a copy of that state tax return that they pasted in there and put it in this chat? Because I think it's,
Sure.
Thank you, Sophie. I think it's worth explaining that. So what we need when we're documenting the self-employment or business income is we need the federal tax return. And that's what Lucio's showing you. They'll all start with a 1040. He's going to go up to the top there. You'll see at the top, it says 1040 U.S. individual income tax return. Right above that, in small words, it says Department of Treasury Internal Revenue Service. That's the IRS that we've been talking about. The IRS is the federal government. This is the tax return that was submitted to the federal government. We each are required to also file a state tax return. So you guys might see those, our applicants, when we ask for a copy of the tax return, I've seen it many, many times where they send us this federal IRS tax return and their state tax return. If your applicant send you a state tax return, delete it. Don't send it to ongoing. We never need the state tax return. And it'll be clear that it's a state tax return because it'll have the name of the state on it. Mine will show Florida. The one that Sophie's going to post, I think it shows like Connecticut or something like that. It's going to look very different. So that just keep that in mind. We never ever need a state tax return. We need the federal tax return.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you, Carrie. Bree, is it okay if I go a little bit over just to wrap up this example?
I'm good with it. Yes.
Okay, awesome. So let's get into the good stuff that is actually related to the self-employment part. So we're going to take a look at the Schedule Cs now. So far we checked and we know that we're dealing with several, and so far what we see is that Namun actually declared one that was related to Instacart. Instacart is a service for delivery when it comes to groceries. So we'll go through the Schedule Cs and see what we have here that we'll may need to address or not with the applicant. So the first one that we're going to see, the first Schedule C, is beauty products. So I'm going to write it down in my notes. Just like that, just to make it simple. Since we don't have a self-employment declaration for this one because it was not added to the application, we'll leave it as pending. And then in line 31, that is the one that tells me the amount. Here it says line 31 is the net income from self-employment for your notes. If I go to line 31, I'll see the amount that Namun actually made throughout 2023 when it comes to beauty products. The thing is, just by looking at the form, I can't really know the start date. Oh, Carrie? Sorry.
No. When you're done, Lou, I'll jump in when you're done. Keep going.
Okay. So the thing is, since we are not entirely sure when the start date is, usually something that could let you know when they started, if they started in the same year, is line H. Here in the Schedule C, you will see that this line says, if started or acquired this business during 2023, check here. So if it is checked, you would know that they actually started during 2023, but we'll still need confirmation that they are actually doing this, and they will need to add it to the application. So what I'd recommend is let's throw it in our notes, then we would verify with the applicant if they are actually still doing this in 2024. So we don't have an anticipated amount because we don't have the self-employment declaration, but I can write down in my notes that the tax return shows this, and we'll leave it as pending. And we'll speak with the applicant and find out if they are actually still doing this. If it was something that they tried in 2023 and it didn't work and they're not doing it anymore, we'll simply add that clarification to the file and we can remove it from our notes. If they are still selling or doing beauty products, they will add it to the application, complete the questions, and we should have the self-employment declaration for that one. Am I making sense so far? This? Carrie, do you want to jump in?
Yes.
Thanks, Lucio. Are we going to talk today about transcripts? I know it came up yesterday, but is it something we're going to hit, Lucio?
We can add it
Okay.
probably for next week.
Okay, perfect. Because Matthias posted a image of a transcript in the chat asking if it was acceptable. But yeah, remind me, we can talk about that next week.
Okay, let me add it. Sophie, can you write it down, please? Thank you. So what here in the cheat sheet tells me is that line 31 should match line 3 on the schedule 1. So the thing is, if we go back to the schedule 1, we'll see that there is a big difference. If we go back, we were dealing with 43,000 and something. So usually what that tells me is that there are multiple schedule Cs. And that's why these don't match. Okay, we'll get into and we'll find out when they do match. So let's keep going and take a look at the other schedule Cs. So the next one was for John. In the case that John actually reported being self-employed, you will use this schedule C to calculate if how much they're actually making. If you talk to John and John says, actually being a delivery didn't work and now I'm actually working for Walmart, then you should have everything to verify his income in Walmart. You will add that clarification that John says that he's not a delivery driver anymore. Did that make sense at all? Okay. So one important thing that you need to always remember is that the fact that there is a Schedule C, it does not mean that they are currently self-employed in that as of the current year. We always need to talk to the applicant, get a clarification if they're still doing so, and then only then when with that clarification they can add it to the application or not, and we will proceed. Any questions so far about this? Okay. So going back to Namun now. So the next schedule that we come across says delivery. So like we were talking about, Instacart is a service of delivery. So we can we assume, Carrie, that we are talking about the same thing? Or should we ask specifically? Okay, Carrie's not there, I think. Well, I'll get to you guys back later on this. So, but if you, let me go back to Google. So if you actually look at Instacart, and if you look what it actually is, it's an online service that lets you shop grocery stores and whatnot, and they take it to your doorstep and give you those groceries. So since they are pretty similar, we are going to add them there as delivery, unless Carrie says otherwise when she gets back. So let's take a look at the amount. We said that line 31st is actually how much they actually made in 2023. So I'm going to throw in my notes that amount. 8731 tax return. And we don't have the verification date. So if they started in 2022, trivia question, do we need to run any type of calculations? Do we need to use the cheat sheet? We don't need to calculate, but we would prepare a calculation sheet using the annual section, just as most likely it's more like a formality just to have it in the file. Even though technically we're not calculating anything, we'll simply throw in here the amount. So there is a calc sheet that actually matches what we're talking about here. And then it will complete it and print it as PDF and add it to the file. But this is simply more like a formality to keep it in the file. Now, I'm thinking, sorry, Sophie, can you remind me once we finish this tax return to come back to Instacart and do it if they started being self-employed in 2023? So that we can show how to run year-to-date calcs?
You mean today?
Mhm.
Okay.
Awesome, thank you. So far, imagining that they started being self-employed in 2020, this is what we have so far. So far with the other Schedule Cs, we're going to find out if they are actually still employed, being self-employed in beauty products. But let's keep going down, because so far, if we add these the amounts on the Schedule Cs, there's still a difference to the amount from the Schedule 1. So let's keep going down. Then we have the one that is for construction design. There's another self-employment that we are not entirely sure if the construct design, just to make it short. We don't have a self-employment declaration. We don't really know if Namun is actually still doing this. What we can know by looking at it is that at least here in the tax return, in line H, it says that Namun actually didn't start in 2023. And then we have the amount here for how much Namun actually made in 2023 in the tax return. But we will need to reach out to the applicant and find out if they are still a designer and doing this in 2024. Am I making sense so far? You can be honest. I'm not gonna get mad. Okay?
I'm scared. No, I'm just kidding.
It's okay. As long as you follow the steps in the cheat sheet, you should be completely fine. And we're going to add a few extra things that we were talking about with Sophie, and it will make your life a lot easier. So just follow the cheat sheet and you should be fine. So now what we were talking about before is that line 31 should match schedule 1. So the thing is, we're going to add together all lines 31st for the schedule Cs, and then it should match line 1. Remember that for the schedule 1 and the 1040 form, those entitle everything together for both that are filing their taxes. Meaning in the schedule 1 and the 1040, we will have a total from everything that comes from John and from Namun together in one. So if I add together all the schedule Cs from both of them, it should match what we have in the schedule 1. And let me show you what I mean with that. And this is simply a way to see if you missed a schedule C, or if for some reason the applicant is missing a schedule C that they didn't provide. Hopefully not, but so I have the amount, and if I go back to the schedule 1, and I check the calculator, I see that those two amounts match. So we have covered all the schedule Cs that we needed to cover. So what do we need to talk to the applicant about? So far, what we know is we have Instacart and delivery that we have verified, that we have a self-declaration for. What we need to find out is, are they actually still doing the beauty products thing and the construction design? If Namun is still doing so, she will need to add it to the application. She will answer the questions and we'll see the self-employment declaration in our end so we can run our calculations. If they say, no, that actually never worked out in 2023 and I'm not doing it anymore, we'll add that clarification to the file and we can simply remove this from our notes. Any questions about this?
Just to confirm and to print it on PDF in my head, do we need to have a self-employment declaration for each one of his employee, or
Each of the Schedule Cs should have their own self-employment declaration.
okay.
If they are still doing it.
Okay, perfect.
So if you see a Schedule C, extra Schedule C that is not declared, you're not going to ask right away to add it. We want to find out if they are actually doing that still. If they are, then yes. If no, we add the clarification that they stopped doing that and we move forward.
Perfect, because the tax return is from the year before.
Exactly.
Great, thanks.
No problem. Okay, let's talk pretty quickly and I'll let you guys go and we'll leave everything else for next week. But let's talk about Instacart for a second. And let's pretend that instead of the start date for the self-employment is in 2020, let me add it and edit it to say that Namun actually started being self-employed for delivery or Instacart in 2023, meaning that since they started being self-employed in 2023, if you guys remember, what we got from Instacart was that Namun was actually making $8,000 and a little bit more that she made in 2023. But the thing is, the self-employment declaration tells me that Namun started in May of that year, meaning that this amount that is declared in the Schedule C for delivery, this one, is actually what Namun made from May 1st, that is the start date of her self-employment, until December 31st, that is the end of 2023. So what we need to do is we need to grab that amount and we need to annualize it so that we can project how much she would make in 12 months. Any guesses on what we would need to do to annualize that? Any guesses?
Well, we use that section of the calc sheet that is for new hires.
Excellent. For new hires, and we're going to run year-to-date calculations for that. So what we're going to do is we come here. We are going to, as the from date, we're going to use the start date that we have in the self-employment declaration. That is May 1st, 2023. And the end date will be the last day of the year of 2023, which is December 31st. And then here in the year-to-date earnings, we're going to add this amount that we actually got from the tax return. And then we would get an annual, okay, there's something weird. There we go. So then we would have that annualized amount here for $13,000 and a little bit more. So I would add it. Yes, Sophie.
Oh, sorry. No, I thought that you were finishing the sentence. No, go ahead.
No, I was pretty much done.
Oh, sorry. No, I was going to say that on page 6 of the cheat sheet, we have something like that explained, but for the other one that it was financial statement of net income, but it explains how to annualize something that wasn't. If you go to a cheat sheet, you will see that. I think that we could add it somewhere else, but just to show them, page 6, it would be, I think. Yeah, down below. There we go. That section could also be used for self-employment when you have the tax return and you don't. But we could add it somewhere else too. But that's the same that you were explaining.
Yeah. So what you need to remember is your from date will be the start date of the self-employment that you would get from the self-employment declaration. Your through date would be the last day of the year, which is until where the tax return ends when. And then you will use that amount from 9/31st of the Schedule C to annualize that amount. Does that make sense? Any questions about this? Okay. All right, I think this is a good point to stop for today. Carrie, would you like to add something?
No, this was beautiful. Thank you, Lucio.
Okay, awesome. Okay, guys, I will send you the marked up form for this file so that you guys have it. I will throw it in the chat in a bit. But then feel free to send any questions you may have, anything that you may find in a tax return that you may think it's a little bit funky and worth talking about. Feel free to send it to me or to Sophie, and we'll discuss them along with the other examples next week.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lucio and
Thank you
Sophie.
so much.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Lou.
Lucio.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thanks,
Thanks
Sophie.
everybody.
Bye,
Carrie.
guys.
Bye,
Thank
guys.
you.
Bye.
Thank you.